COOGS House. It's here. We made it. The Houston Cougars play basketball this weekend. Kind of.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs Daily Podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Angel. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who can step by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate you making this your first listen each and every day when joining the conversation. But know what to say, tell us in the comments down below whether you consider cereal a soup in your household. There is a wrong answer to that question. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. More on that later, but it's technically an exhibition, but we get Houston Cougar basketball this weekend, and I cannot tell you how excited I am. I got all kinds of stuff I want to say about this game exhibition. I'm going to say game a lot. Actually, that's the first thing I'm going to say game a lot. I really want to talk about like what is at stake, or what you can expect to be played for this weekend, because I think that's important to keep in perspective with an exhibition. I want to talk some about the Aggies, because Texas A&M running, fighting Aggs. That's who Houston's got. Again, they're familiar. We'll talk about that. But first and foremost, this year's Houston Cougar basketball roster looks different at like one spot. Now, that one spot's really important, and that Jamal Shead, everything last year. Big 12 player of the year, Big 12 defense player of the year, National Defense Player of the Year, a couple different awards. He was first team All-American. He's out in Toronto killing it with the Raptors. Had a great first game of the season. Looks like he's solidified himself as a backup point guard already, and may do more than just that. Houston's got to replace him, and I want to talk some about the metaphorical replacement and then the literal replacement. Metaphorically, Jamal Shead was Houston Cougar basketball, and frankly still is. But as far as on the present tense roster, he was Houston Cougar basketball. The culture, the toughness, the grit, the what do you need me to do? I'll do it. Run through the brick wall. How fast we get a head start or not? Those kinds of things were Jamal Shead. Last year, he was on the preseason awards list for the Cousy Award, the best point guard in America. The year before, you remember Houston had to replace 3 starters from the 2023 team to the 2024 team, and Marcus Sasser, Jarris Walker, and Tremont Mark. Marcus Sasser was on the preseason, I think it's the Jerry West Award, is the shooting guard of the year. Sasser won the West Award, and I'd almost argue that I think nationally the perception was that was going to be more challenging to replace than you factor in Jarris and Tremont, right? Going from 23 to 24 was supposed to be daunting, and especially when you're adding that you're jumping to the Big 12. And Houston won the conference in the regular season by 2 games with all of that happening because of the growth, the maturity, the development of one Jamal Shead. So as you get into the season, I think the natural element, the starting lineup, as far as what's going to replace that, we all talk about those all the time, so I'm sure this is no like spoilers or anything. I think the national perception is that it's going to be LJ Cryer. Cryer's sharpshooter, high point man returning from last year, movement shooter, off the dribble shooter. To his credit, I would argue he's a much improved defender. He's probably, because of how strong the starting 5 is defensively, probably, in the back half of defenders at the University of Houston. But that's really more, I think, a testament to who he's playing with. LJ Cryer is just, while he's gotten better, he's an offensive basketball player, right? I expect to see more improvement going into this year, another year in the system, right? I open with the awards, some of those different award things, because I weirdly think LJ Cryer is going to get nominated for that same Jerry West Award that Marcus Sasser won a couple years ago. And then Karl Malone Award is the power forward. I think that's going to get Jawan Roberts. Jawan Roberts was on the list last year preseason, and frankly, from a pure leadership standpoint, if Houston has the kind of year that they project to have, I weirdly feel like he has a really good shot at winning that this year. Power forward is a unique position. A lot of guys that are that big and dominant will play center or go out and stretch out. They shoot well and play on the outside. J1's a true power forward. He's a great passer, great defender, great shot blocker, great rebounder, but athletic enough to do a lot of the four things. Anyway, they have the only roster in the Big 12 with 2 first-team All-Big 12 guys. In the preseason, they're number 4 in the AP poll, and yada, yada, yada. This roster is built around 4 returning starters in LJ Cryer, who we've mentioned, Emmanuel Sharp, Jalen Roberts, Javier Francis, and inserting in that point guard spot, replacing Jamal Shead, is Milos Uzan. And I feel like when he talks about his game, but he'll probably be the headline conversation piece for the first several games, including this exhibition of the season, because he's how things fit differently. Now, he's a point guard, and one of the first things Sampson said about him when they got him in the transfer portal last spring, early summer, I guess late spring, was that him being a point guard was a key factor in why they brought him in. He's a pass-first guy offensively that can attack the basket, but wants to pass the basketball. His size helps him a lot on defense in both areas, though. He attacks and creates. He's, I don't want to say a gambler, like he makes dumb decisions, but he's aggressive and like he pokes the ball and stuff like that and passing. It's getting big 6'4" point guard frame. You see the like Houston-esque intensity on defense in spots in his stuff in Oklahoma. Go back and watch a couple of their better games, especially like you see it pop at different points. Have to imagine, like we talked about LJ Cryer growing in his first year as a Houston Cougar, as a defender. Have to imagine the same thing happens to Milos as well. For what it's worth, I should probably stress that Milos is a better defender coming in than LJ was coming in. So with the same kind of growth, he'll probably be a really good defender because LJ ended up becoming a pretty good one by the time it's all said and done. Milos Uzan is just the 4th point guard in the program, 4th starting point guard in the program under Kelvin Sampson. You had Galen Robinson, DeJon Jarreau, Jamal Shead. Those guys are all in the NBA. Right, Galen just signed a 2-way or the deal with the Pelicans for the season. DeJon Jarreau is a 2-way guy with Memphis, and Jamal Shead is, like we just talked about, a rookie backup point guard for the Toronto Raptors. That's a lot of those are really big shoes to fill. Those are 3 tremendous program-changing, very literally point guards. And weirdly, it feels like Junior Milos Uzan might be a part of that same shift. The guy that I want to talk about in this roster, in the starting 5, I said roster, I'm really starting on the starting 5 here, that I think is getting less love nationally than people should be giving him. And the guy that I feel like is going to have a bigger impact and is going to look like a different guy. Like Milos is a new guy, right? This is going to feel like a new guy in a lot of ways, and that's Emmanuel Sharp. Listen, last year when Houston needed a bucket, there were moments where he stole the spotlight from Jamal Shead, right? We don't talk about a second how Houston got to play A&M twice last year. In the first of those games, Emmanuel Sharp catches fire and it is a big, big part of why Houston wins. That happened a couple of different times last year for Houston where Emmanuel Sharp was just the bucket they needed at the right time. He is an incredibly aggressive scorer. And by that, I mean, whenever he has the ball, from wherever he is on the court, the defense is always panicked because they know he can score, right? What's impressive about watching him, and I mean this in the most positive way, because of his injury as a senior in high school, he was kind of out of shape when he first got here. He had to like get back into shape, get into Houston Cougar basketball shape. He looks like a athlete right now, walking around at practice clips and stuff like that, right? Whenever you see stuff about him right now playing on the basketball, I mean, the guy looks like he's in the best shape of his life. He had that, remember, catastrophic leg injury as a senior in high school. And so things were kind of slow, where he was the first guard off the bench as a freshman, started last year as a sophomore. And this year as a junior, on top of being the leader that Houston's going to rely on to be at that small forward spot, I think he's the guy that's going to take the bulk of that offensive share that Jamal Shead leaves behind, right? LJ Cryer was already scoring a lot. It's going to be hard for him to do more from a shooter perspective. Milos is a pass first guy, and there'll be aspects of the offense that, Jamal Shead had plenty of games. We had 12 assists and 1 turnover, right? Those kind of games will fall into Milos's lap. But when it comes to the scoring, the 29 points against Texas, the 32 points, the Baylor buzzer beater that should have counted or whatever, right? Like those moments are going to be Emmanuel. And I feel very confident in that. I'm able to see things like what Javier's added to his game, what JoJo Tugler looks like, what Arsenault looks like coming back healthy as you go on down the roster. But in the starting 5 group, I just don't think Emmanuel Sharp is getting his due nationally. And I really feel like it won't take long for people to see what I think most of us with Houston Cougar fans have been watching out of him for a long time now. He's got this like instinct mentality, you want to call it like the Mamba thing, the dog and whatever. Like when he's got the ball, the defense is in trouble. And I don't really have a more articulate way to put it than that. But Emmanuel Sharp's got it. And I feel like year 3 here, this is a big moment for that kid. And I'm really excited to see it. I think it starts on Sunday with Texas A&M. Now, I want to talk some about scouting the Aggies and what they've got coming back, what they've got coming in. But before we get too far, we do need to talk a little bit about our buddies over at Z-Biotics, because Z-Biotic pre-alcohol drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink alcohol, I found this out, this is science, gets converted into a toxic byproduct, that sounds bad, in your gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's blamed for your rough day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break that byproduct down. Just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll be feeling your best the next day. Again, that's 3 steps. Drink pre-alcohol, drink responsibly, enjoy the next day. Go to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at checkout. Z-Biotics is back with 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE to get 15% off. Also going to tell you about our buddies over at Prize Picks, because right now is the best time to win some cash, because it's always a great time to win cash. And Prize Picks is the best place to get real money on sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded and winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury assurance policy. So your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Every Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts your player projections up to 25% for even more value in your lineups. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into I know you got sports opinions. I see those comments. You can turn those into real money all season long at Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. Get $50 off instantly. $50 back instantly after your first $5. I'm going to download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 line. Prize Picks, run your game. Parker Angel, Locked On Cougs here, talking about the A&M scrimmage or A&M exhibition game. It's also not a scrimmage. That's important to say. This Sunday. Now, Houston played Texas A&M twice last season. Once in they played once in Toyota Center. Some of my words there. Once in the Toyota Center in, I forget what the sponsor was, but in a non-conference game in December. Actually, famously for last season, that was the game we lost Terrence Arsenault in, right? Great Wade Taylor versus Jamal Shead matchup down the stretch. Emmanuel Sharp gets hot. Houston wins that game, right? As luck would have it, Houston played Texas A&M in the second round of the NCAA tournament as well. And another barn burner type of game. A&M gets hot late. It's a crazy buzzer beater. Houston, between injuries and foul trouble, is having to play injured Ramon Walker. That's the Ryan Elvin comes in and makes the free throw at the end of the game kind of game because there's just no one else healthy and without 5 fouls able to come in the game and play. Other highlight of the game was Jamal Shead had a putback dunk. That was a thing that happened. Those are 2 fun games. For what it's worth, A&M, or for the Aggies, Houston was their last game last season and also is how they're opening this season, which is a little weird. For Houston, it was their second to last game last season because after the Jamal Shead injury, they lost to Duke in the Sweet 16 just 1 game later. And Jamal Shead got hurt. Things have been a lot different, but so it hasn't been that long since these 2 coaching staffs square off in a, frankly, higher stakes matchup. Sampson and Buzz Williams know each other from coaching circles, and frankly, there were A&M staffs that Buzz Williams was on as the lead assistant that coached against staffs that Oklahoma were Sampson's the head guy. There was some Indiana Marquette games there for the hot second, right? And then since he's been at, I guess, Virginia Tech before A&M, Buzz Williams has been a very passionate defensive coach. I would say, frankly, he's a coach that is a lot like Sampson. And so this matchup is a lot of fun. It's also a very familiar one, especially when you factor in that Houston returns 4 of their 5 starters and got healthy in their bench. All good things, right? And A&M returns 77% of their scoring. I couldn't find that ranked nationally, but that is highest in the SEC as far as percentage of scoring returning. They did lose Tyrese Radford, but pulled in kind of 2 guys that do his job, and Zurich Phelps, great rangy defender, and then CJ Wilcher was a shooter from Nebraska, has 2 different 40% from behind the arc 3 seasons, 2 different behind the arc seasons of 40% shooting in the last 3 years, with decent volume as well. The biggest thing you got to remember with Texas A&M, if you don't remember from last year, is they're the biggest rebounding test Houston played last year. They're the same kind of rebounding intensity. Buzz Williams is a guy that focuses on it just as much as Kelvin Sampson does. The same way Houston does drills for long periods of practice, different points in the year, where they just put bubbles over the rim and just rebound. A&M appears to be the kind of program that's the exact same thing, right? One of the best rebounding programs, offensive rebounding programs in the entire NCAA last year. Their biggest issue is, and CJ Wilcher should help with some of this, but they're as far as the season-long statistics go, a really bad shooting team last year. Their best offense was an offensive rebound putback or Wade Taylor isolation. Wade Taylor, if you don't remember, had big scoring games in the first game, and then he had big scoring moments at key parts of the game in the second game, we'll say. Wade Taylor, both games against Houston, feel like he shot way over his head in terms of shooting percentage. He's making 35-footers with Jamal Shead draped all over him last year in Toyota Center. I mean, like, the guy just shot out of his mind. He's a great scorer. I mean, an all SEC caliber scorer. I don't mean to say he can't score the basketball, but some of those jump shots were ridiculous. I would imagine that something else crazy happens in this one as well. Everyone's feeling a little bit loose. Everyone's working the game all off season, right? I also just feel like because he did it, he had those moments in both games last year that he's just going to have them again. As far as how this matchup goes, I mentioned Emmanuel Sharp had the big game against them last year. I imagine they'll probably try and mark him up and do different things. I want to talk about the stakes in this game will play out in the third segment, so I'll keep some of that for that section. A big factor in this game, though, as far as matchups go, with that rebounding battle, is going to be Houston and their big depth, right? We know that Jawan Roberts and Javier Francis are starting bigs. We know what they can do. We also, though, know that you'll have to see some of Sedlot, I imagine you'll get to see Jacob McFarland for the first time in any sort of real action. I also think that when you look at this game, JoJo Tugler as the first guy off the bench, especially with unclear about how much Arsenal can go these days, right? I think JoJo Tugler being the first guy off the bench can be impactful with rebounding as well, and that kind of like multi-headed monster. It's more than three. Um, that'll be interesting because when Houston played them in the NCAA tournament game last year, a lot of those guys were hurt. I mean, J1 was playing dinged up. Uh, JoJo was out hurt. McFarland was redshirted. I mean, some of those things weren't working in their favor. And so I feel like it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in this game because it's something that A&M prides themselves on, but Houston does too. So that's the matchup I'm looking at. Is A&M will probably shoot better in this game, in this scrimmage, or in this exhibition game than they will the rest of the year because that's how they did things last year. And kudos to them for finding ways to exploit that. That's not bad. But also, winning the rebounding battle will prove to be important. This is a team that pushed Houston and beat them in that category, right, last year. And so finding those spots be important. Now, I want to talk some about like the stakes of a exhibition game and what to expect going into the weekend and playing it on Sunday. Before we get to that, we said that FanDuel is the people. They are the people bringing the show today, and FanDuel's America's number one sportsbook because right now, if you're watching an NFL game, if you're watching college football this weekend, if you get a hunch in the middle of a game to go check out the latest stats, if you like play-by-play and so much more, you can do it all on the same page and same place that you're placing your bets, and you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. You place your first $5 bet at FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com, America's number one sportsbook. Parker Ranger Locked on Cougs here, breaking down, looking at the start of the Houston Cougar basketball season, at least the part of it we get to see. The exhibition game this Sunday with Texas A&M in the city of Houston. And we'll talk about what, like, stakes might not be the best way to even define this segment, but really, like, what to expect the stakes to look like in this game. Because, like, last year, it required waking up at 3 a.m., to watch YouTube streams from Australia, but we got to see Houston do some like games that don't count against pretty high caliber opponents, right, last year. And I think it's interesting to see what Sampson does in these because Kelvin Sampson is a cutthroat winner. And I mean, he's the kind of guy that he's got to sneak something off the checkerboard and checkers to beat his grandma. He might do that too, right? He's the kind of guy that wants to win in everything he does. All the practice drills have winners and losers. I mean, everything is about winning. But this exhibition game is also like functionally one of two preseason games you've got, whatever you want to call it, the scrimmage and the super secret scrimmage against Ole Miss. I guess they know what happened, right? But it's really only the second one of those. And it's unique in college sports at all to get preseason action, right? College football doesn't get preseason games to kind of warm up, get used to your lineup or whatever, and test things out. Basketball is kind of functioning with that because whatever happens on Sunday does not hit either team's record, right? So frankly, the first thing they want to make sure they do is get out of it healthy because the next game will, right? And so knock on wood, but after last year and after the end of the year before, and the middle of the year before that, we want to make sure that this works out differently, right? But looking at like those scrimmages that Houston played against Australian teams on their tour at the end of last summer, what's interesting about the way Sampson goes about these things is you'll see for the first half-ish, maybe a little longer in the second half, depending how things are going, a lot of things that might not make sense. Different lineups, interesting things, saying who can play with who together. The offense is going to look stuck in the mud. It just is. The focus is so much on defense with this program that the offense always kind of takes less practice time, right? But you're going to see like different lineups. You might see some LJ at point guard lineups. You might see some lineups where Emmanuel Sharp is bringing the ball up the court, or at least run the offense through him. You might see J1 Roberts kind of features a passer, and then a couple substitutions later, he's the guy they're trying to funnel all the shots through, right? Like you're going to see a lot of different things happen on the floor. Especially with guys coming off the bench, like we're going to see kind of what Mercy Miller can do, right? We know he was an electric, like high end in the high nationally ranked scorer in the country in high school. But what can Mercy do at this level? He's built to do it physically, but what will it look like against a stout A&M team, right? Chase McCarty comes in as a kind of multi-tooled wing player. What's he do as a freshman in this lineup, in this team? Where can you put? Is he more of a 3, more of a 4? Want to put his back on the block with smaller guards? You want to pull him out and like have him sharpshoot from the corners? Seeing where he fits in will be important, right? JoJo Tugler, does he get a lot more reps at the 4 or the 5? Do you go with some lineup where you have Jawan Roberts go all 3 of them with 3 guys? Like, where do those guys all fit together, right? I'm not saying that any Sampson has told me that's the lineups they're going with or anything like that, but I am saying you're going to see different lineups that look kind of funky for the first portions of this exhibition because Houston's going to have to get some stuff on tape against new guys, right? And they want to see what it looks like and see what they can play with. And for what it's worth, there will be some games that Houston's pretty confident they're going to win in the early part of the non-conference slate that they probably do things similarly, right? Then in key moments down the stretch, end of game, end of half, or if things just aren't going very well, that's when you'll see Houston put the dudes in and turn it on. Now, who the dudes are in a given day, we know how deep this roster is when they're all healthy. Those could be different, right? I don't mean to say it's the starting 5 or anything like that, but I think there'll be moments picked and chosen very intentionally where those happen. And then I think the goal will be in the last 10 minutes of exhibition, or maybe even earlier, depending on what the score is, to go get the game, right? That's when you say, okay, now it's time to win, right? And so you'll see the toying with, the messing with, etc. Now, I also think it's interesting because, look, I had the take through the day. I think Houston's getting disrespected. I think Houston's getting disrespected because Jamal Shead left. And Jamal Shead left for the pros, go make much money. And I don't mean to say that he won't be like a hard guy to replace. You don't replace Jamal Shead. Like, you just kind of figure out a new way to play, right? But some of these things, like Houston being ranked behind Kansas in the AP and the Big 12 polls, and different publications coming out saying Houston's overrated. How is Houston going to finish that high after they lost Jamal Shead and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Houston lost 3 starters the year before. 3 impressive starters. 2 of them were first-round picks in the NBA draft that year. Houston turned around from that and won the Big 12. Now, I know the Big 12 was different. You added in Arizona. BYU looks better, right? Kansas went ahead, a couple transfers and whatever, right? All happened, sure. At some point, though, Houston's got the crown, and I don't think they're just handing it over. I think that there's been anyway, there are levels to that. I care about that as a podcaster more than anyone in the actual program does, so I won't sit on it too long. Here's what I will say, is this game is, I believe it's ESPN Plus or something, but this game is, for all intents and purposes, televised. If you want to shut anyone up, if you want to show anyone what you got, if you want to show those AP voters, hey, check out those Cougs, this is where you do it, right? Because this isn't, with all due respect, Timbuktu State. This isn't middle of nowhere Tech. This is the Aggies. And the Aggies, I'm telling you right now, are going to have a really good year in the SEC. They had an impressive finish to the year last year, have a tremendous guard in Wade Taylor. If you were going to show some people what you really are, I cannot think of a better low-stakes opportunity to do it. And here's the crazy thing, and this is where I'll finish. With the NIL Players Era Tournament happening in Las Vegas, switching that final day to where it's no longer a round-robin in your pool, but a true championship-style matchup, this might not be the last time in the year 2024 that Houston and A&M play. How crazy is that? Anyway, we'll talk more about that if and when it happens. I'm excited to talk about Houston Cougar basketball. Get in 2 episodes that day because there's just so much to talk about. I kind of like having this like hoopy hour part of the day too. Hey, let's just sit around and talk hoops at the end of the day. Anyway, like, subscribe, hit the bell so you know we're live. It'll be live after for post-game stuff. this weekend, and you don't want to miss it. Locked On Cougs is a prime member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every single day. Go Cougs.